Hello and welcome to an introduction to Abyssal Deadspace. It's Kurai here, and today we're going to take a look at this PV activity that can make you a fair amount of risk for not too much risk. You can find some information about this activity in game in your agency tab when you go to encounters, and you can see it's the last tab here. So let's dive in and see what this is all about. So the basics of this is it's kind of like an instance dungeon for Eve, and you enter it via filaments. That you can obtain these from data sites and Abyssal Deadspace itself once you're in, but most people get them from Abyssal Deadspace because rather than running data sites specifically for these filaments. Although if you get any filaments when you're exploring and you don't want to use them, you can of course sell them and buy some from the market. These filaments basically go into 7 tiers of increasing difficulty. You need various different ships and fits to successfully complete these tiers solo. It's limited to Tech 1, Tech 2, Navy faction and Pirate faction cruisers. And you can only put a single cruiser into an Abyssal. You can enter with 2 destroyers, or you can enter with up to 3 frigates. So how do we get into this space? Well, if we take a look in here, I have a few filaments ready to go. They look like this. They have various names that we'll talk about later. But basically, you need to have a few of these to get going. So you can buy these off the market. If we quickly go in here, you can see that they're under trade goods, filaments, and then the various types of filaments. The fit I've got does well in this type called an electrical filament, and when I run the class, this is the one that I usually take students into for the first time with Punisher fits. So we'll probably run one of these today and see how it goes. The fit that I'm using should be on the description, but just in case, I'm actually running a Tech 2 optimal fit for the lowest tier of Abyssals called T0. My fit here just consists very basically of some pulse lasers with a Tech 2 ammo. This gets me close to 140 DPS out to 13 kilometers optimal. And with my close range ammo, which is Conflag, my range is reduced, it's about halved, but I've got well over 200 DPS. So this can pack a punch once you have skills if you want to invest in this. And this is great skills to invest into. We use a lot of MR ships in Eve Doctrines. Med slots are not too interesting. Basic prop mod, that's your primary defense mod. It turns out speed is king. Avoiding damage in Abyssals is more important than DPS you can bring, so having some kind of prop mod is ideal. We pick compact here just for fitting requirements. I then have a cap battery. This just helps my cap because I'm running an active tank, as you'll see in a second, and if anything decides to nuke me in the Abyssal Deadspace, then I've got a little bit of resistance to that. But the real kind of power of this fit comes, and for all Punisher fits, comes from its low slots because it has 5 of them. So I'm running a double rep, 2 heat sinks, you can use metas for these, and a compact energized membrane to add some resists. So as you can see, with everything running, I will run out of cap in a minute normally with this fit. But previously I did talk about this doing quite well in electricals, so maybe there's something to this. If we investigate here, we can maybe find out why this can work a little bit better inside our electricals. So you can see here, if you go into info, it tells you a lot about what type of Abyssal you'll likely encounter and what kind of environment it has. All of these different named Abyssal types, such as dark and exotic, have different types of meta environments. So this one's an electrical storm, and if we go in and see what this does, is it says that this one has ships in this environment receive a penalty to EM resistance and a bonus to capacitor recharge. So when we go in this Abyssal, we'll immediately take a penalty in EM resistance, but our capacitor recharge rate will be boosted. This will help us enable to run 2 reps for longer. Most of the time though, you'll probably only actually be running with 1 rep, and you see that the fit is then stable. We do have a slightly more Nubro friendly fit here. This one sorts out the pulse for beams, for meta beams. This is just to get you that range back. You can see if we go with standard here, we can hit further out than I could. That's a bit further than you really need for T0, and with multi-frequency you're almost at 10-12 kilometers and you're still bringing OK DPS. So it's really up to yourself. Play around with the fits and see what suits your playstyle. Obviously the beams won't track as well as the pulse lasers will, so you may miss a few more hits if you get up and close to something. So with that all said, let's see how we can actually dive into an Abyssal and get running. So as I said previously, if we are attempting this in a frigate, then all tiers of Abyssals, this is T0, the Tranquil type, are balanced around 3 frigates. And that means that we actually need 3 electrical filaments per run, even though I'm only intending on doing this solo. Okay, so I need to put this in my cargo hold. I have all my different ammo types here. You may have multi-frequency, standard and radio to set your different engagement range. I'm just running with Conflag and Scorch just now though. It all looks like I've already put some in there, so we'll just pop them back. Okay, so if you want to try this out in PZ, if you're down in null or you're in low security space, then I would suggest that you get to a quiet system to do this, and the reason for this will become evident in a bit. But I am going to chance my luck today. I'm going to be a bad, and I'm going to run this in PZ. I think right now it's fairly calm and there's not too much going on. So the first point of call is it's a good idea to know how to make a safe spot. So to do this, a really basic one is you can pick any planet, just warp to a range. Then when you're mid-warp, you want to just hit Control B somewhere in the mid-warp and create a point. And then we just wait till we get out of warp. And we're going to then warp back to that point, and what that's going to mean is we're not on grid with any big celestial that other people can warp to. So at minimum, someone trying to hunt you down is going to need to bring probes. Now a lot of people who do hunt other people down do bring probes. But it at least makes it a little bit more difficult, so do yourself a favour and run these at some kind of safe spot. This is the most basic type. There's other guides out there on how to make a safer safe spot, for example, but this will do for us just now. So once you land on grid, you want to open up your cargo hold, and you will see that if you are like this just by yourself, you can right click the filament, hit use, and you'll get this menu coming up. Now with this menu you can select if you want to do this as 3 frigates, 2 destroyers or 1 cruiser. Now we're obviously in the frigates, and you can see here it's not letting me continue because I'm not in a fleet. So I need to make a fleet with myself. So to do that, I'm just going to find myself somewhere in a list in a chat channel and just form fleet with myself. Okay, it's a good idea to do this before you leave, by the way. If you do this in space, it'll take a few seconds for this to basically be active, and you can see it's popped up there. So we'll now activate, and you can see that a new object in your overview should appear, called an Abyssal Trace. Once that's been lit, you can jump as if it was an acceleration gate or a stargate, and you get a new menu. It tells you the type of environment that's there, and it also says that we only actually have 20 minutes to complete this, so there's a time limit on these. You must enter and escape within this time limit, or your ship and pod is destroyed. Once you enter, there is no escape other than progressing through the 3 pockets in the system. So this is a fully committed type of PvE. You must complete the system. So what can we see here? Okay, well I have 1 enemy, I have a cache, I have an acceleration gate, and I have a tower. Now these are completely RNG based what you'll get. I have no idea what I was going to get before I came in here. This type of tower, it's nice that I've got this, basically is like a point defense tower. If you get within 20 or 30 kilometers of it, it will shoot your drones and it will shoot down missiles, and that includes drones and missiles launched by enemies. So do stay away from these if you are using those weapon types. This is the enemy that spawned for us. I should say as well that the electrical storm that's penalising our EM resist also applies to enemies. So that's why, as well as having this cap bonus to allow us to run these, it was very fortunate that we've chosen a type of fit that shoots primarily EM and a bit of thermal damage, which means that we're going to do more damage to our enemies. So I'm going to go ahead, he's pretty close now, and shoot this guy and get him destroyed as quickly as possible. You can see up here in the top left that we have our time limit counting down, so we must complete the site within that time limit, so just bear in mind that timer. As he's shooting us, this fit's based on repairing damage to armour, so I don't really care about shields. Those are just a little bit of bonus, let you get into your optimal range. I've got no way to repair them, so just let him do his damage. I'm orbiting him here at 500. He's kind of trying to maintain a distance, so we're applying okay at that, and now he's dead. You'll notice that he didn't drop any loot. Mobs in this space do not have loot. All of the loot is contained in this object here, which is the cash, and this is your primary way of getting your money. So we'll just go up ahead and repair that little bit of damage. And get in range. This has very low HP, it only has 300. Drops a canister, like any other lootable item. You can just go right ahead and loot that. And from that we got about 1.2 million, which is okay. Once you've defeated all the enemies, the gate will activate and you can progress on to the next pocket. If you activate this and don't loot your cash, then you have lost your loot. So make sure that you get your loot before you exit. So let's just jump into the next pocket now. One good tactic to use against most fights, especially in T0, is you can orbit the cache itself. Make sure your prop mod is on. You can turn that off now. And this means that the enemies will come to you and you have a fixed point to orbit them around. So you can see here that we have a cloud. This cloud will give us a buff or debuff if we enter it. So I'm going to go see what this cloud does. I'll also shoot our enemies and turn on our reps so that we don't die. So you can see that this particular cloud gives us a signature radius penalty. Now again, with everything in Abyssal Deadspace, that also applies to our enemies. So in this case, this blue type of cloud, if we're having problems tracking a particular enemy, we can drag him in here and we can apply better damage to him. Bear in mind, he can apply better damage to us, so you need to weigh the kind of pros and cons of that. There exists other types of clouds, it's completely RNG what you get. There is a white one that's probably the most dangerous because it massively boosts your speed, and especially if you're using a micro warp drive, you can get launched at 30 kilometers. There exists in this pocket a defined edge that I'll show you in the final room, but basically this edge, you can go slightly past it and you'll start to take a little bit of damage. The more that you go past it, the more damage that you take. So if you ever pilot past this defined edge, then you should double click in space back towards or hit approach on the cache or the acceleration gate to get back in as soon as possible, or you may die. So we're going to go into the next room here. And indeed that is for frigates with micro warp drives the number one way that you tend to die, running slightly higher tier abyssals. And we're going to go see if we can find this because we have a bit of spare time. This is the final room, and after this you'll see that the acceleration gate has changed to an origin conduit. That's how you know that that one will then take you back to the area space that you entered the abyssal from. But we are going to lock this guy up and kill him anyways. Might change to a longer range here, which lets us hit out reliability about 16. So you should be able to apply quite well. I think this guy's got quite strong shields, but once we get through his shields, the rest of them should quickly melt away. I am in an Afterburner ship, so this might take a little minute or two to find our edge, but I just want to show you what it looks like so that you know, if you run into it, you'll know what to avoid. One other final cloud is the red cloud. The red cloud basically nerfs shield boosters to the point where you are spending more cap to get less boost. And that basically means if you're running an active shield boosting fit, then you're at a disadvantage being in red clouds. However, if you're like me and running an armor fit and you notice that the enemies are I'm not hitting them anymore, are shield boosting, you can take them in and they will be negatively affected. So you can start to see here, this is our edge, and we need to be careful about flying beyond that. Okay, so let's go ahead and just wrap this up and kill this guy. Get back close to him again and I'll be able to go into my closer range. You got a good hit on me there because I tried to approach him directly rather than keeping my transversal up. So the enemies you receive in here are completely RNG based, as I said before, and it's a good idea to do a bit of your own research into the different types of enemies. Different enemies will apply better at range or close. So the tactic for some enemies is to try and have a longer range weapon system and run away, or other enemies is to get in close and get under their guns, usually for the larger types of enemies that we'll see in the higher tier Abyssals. So that's that guy done. Not knowing your enemy type is really the #1 way of dying in these Abyssal runs. And once you learn what types of enemies are a threat to you and the type of fit that you have, you can start to make strategies to counter that. But do not be scared to double click in space. Manual piloting forms a part of this content. You can get away in T0 just with orbiting this cache, but in higher tiers you'll have to orbit enemies or manually pilot to set your distance correctly for your weapon optimals, for example. So let's get our final cache. And then we'll just run out as quick as we can. We still have over 12 minutes though, so we're doing not too bad. Now, if you run this in a dangerous area space like nullsec, and especially in a system that can sometimes be full of hostiles, then the trace that you left can actually be combat scanned down, which means that when you exit here, you could have some not so friendly people waiting for you and have the area bubbled if you're in null, or just ready to lock you up and point you if you're in low. That's why a lot of people run these in alts and high sec, for example. However, today we got lucky and there is no one here, so let's just get back home as quickly as we can, and we'll talk about where we're doing that, a little bit of the loot that we got in this run once I stack it up here. So you can see that I came with just 3 electrical filaments, and actually I got quite a few filaments as a payout. Some of these are worth different varying amounts of money. Some of the higher tier filaments are worth multi-millions. But this is really the kind of main loot here. So these surveys are effectively NPC buy order items, which means if you go to any Concord station, you can get a guaranteed 100,000 ISK per unit for these. I think there is one around about 12 jumps from PZ, but they're very easy to find. Just searching the Concord corporation and finding where its nearest stations are. Unaffiliated to me, there is various buybacks. One is specifically targeting Abyssals, while others will take Abyssal loot. So you can shop around and see which ones suit you if you don't fancy transporting these through dangerous areas of space, for example. The other types of loot is materials that are basically used in the production of Triglavian and mods, Triglavian ships, and mods that you can get in Abyssal Deadspace that will drop in the higher tier Abyssals. Yeah, in that one run for this, in this case, for example, we made 2.5 million. That can vary a bit, but you can expect to make that roughly per T0 run, which is okay for a little bit of PV activity. The NPCs and the caches, strangely enough, do contribute towards your skilling spree challenge. So if you want some quick, easy enemies, once per day, it's easy to grab a couple of filaments and go pop some ships and get a little bit of loot. In the future, I'll be expanding to cover higher tier Abyssals. In these T0, you can expect as a new player to make something up to about 20 million to 30 million an hour for the time it takes to run them. In T1 even, run in frigates. with something no more expensive than a worm, which might be a little bit of a buy-in if you have not so much money, but as long as you're careful with it, you won't lose it. You can expect to make somewhere in the region of about 30 to 50 million ISK an hour, which is starting to get for a new player okay, and then there's a clear progression path to tier 2 and tier 3, where you can start to make some more serious money. So hopefully you found that useful and you will give these a go. I will try and run other live classes again at this level, and then trying to expand on the tiers to try and push tiers to T1, T2, and show you what kind of levels of money you can expect from that. Thank you very much for listening.